Okay, so Antony Cousins, VP of Product at Meltwater, here to talk about owning your narrative in the age of AI. I'm going to skip the intro because I've got way too much content for a 30-minute slot. Okay, how to own your narrative in the age of AI. In order to explain or talk about the changes to owning your narrative in this era versus the previous eras, I wanted to talk a little bit about how this era is different. And I think this era we are entering, the age of AI, is as different as the age of social media and as different as the age of broadcast news. So I wanted to explain about that, and to do that, I went and found our slide. Meltwater, as you do, go find the slide, reuse it. And I found these words: the landscape is shifting rapidly and permanently. I thought, well, yes, that is true, but it's also always been true, right? I've written these words 100 times. People in this room, you've probably written these same words a dozen times or more. But how are they different now to how they were different previously? So I think the difference is that if you look back, you remember back into the day, right? I was a young, naive press officer in 2006, 2007 in the Ministry of Defense press office. And I remember thinking at the time, God, this is so much content. This is so fast. It's all happening so fast. And yet I'd kind of file my copy, file my lines, and I'd go to the same pub the journalist did at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the news would happen in the evening, right? I remember thinking at the time, this is so fast-paced, but really I was dealing with Sky, CNN, BBC, Times, Telegraph, Guardian, and maybe Radio 4 if we cared. And that was it for the number of channels that we had. And that was fine because back then, the grouping of people, right, the polarization of people that we'd inherited in part from the age-old newspaper, where there was just really left and right or rich or poor, the polarization we got from there was reinforced by the broadcast era and was reinforced by the newspapers and your choices of the media you got in the early 2000s, which was fine because it was okay. You were buying the product. If you didn't like what you saw or what you heard, you could change the channel, go buy a different newspaper. You were owning the content and it was the product. And that was okay. But then we entered the social media era where you are no longer buying the product, you are the product. Are you paying for it? No, then you're the product. Right? And this changed the game because the algorithms took over in deciding the content that you got. If you go into social media and look for something, you're only ever one swipe away from seeing something the algorithms decided you should see instead of what you wanted to see. And this was a fundamental shift in the ecosystem, a fundamental shift in the landscape that the content started buying you. And why was that different? Why was that such a massive impact for brands? Well, because of the fact that the algorithms figured out that the best way to keep people's attention on social media was to give them either two kinds of content, anger or fear, the two most profitable emotions that we've discovered. And we know this from a couple of different research pieces. One this is actually before Elon took over at Twitter. They did some research comparing a human-generated feed to an algorithmically generated feed and how people reacted to that. And all the humans said, I love the human-generated feed. Show me the content that I want to see. And Twitter went, that doesn't make us anywhere near as much money. So we got the algorithmically generated feed. We also know from some research done last August that we cannot fix this problem. The problem we all now feel in our society isn't going to change, isn't going to go away, because they did some research, they put some bots and some robot networks together, and they sped up time. They had the bots create content, like and share, and they had the networks kind of with their moderation policies, their amplification policies, create content and share content and push it to the top of the feeds. And what happened over time was exactly what we've got in our real world. Everyone hated each other, right? There was the right, and then there was the left, and there was no conversation in between, no trust, no dialogue, right? We know this from our own feeds. They thought, well, that must be the moderation policies of the social media networks. So they took the moderation policies out, vanilla networks, but with kind of politically biased bots. Exact same thing happened. And then they thought, well, what for fun? Why don't we just take the political bias out of everything? Vanilla bots, vanilla networks, and see what happens. And can you guess what happened? Everyone still hated each other because even a minor difference in kind of a left or a right-leaning post will still be amplified over time and take us to the same situation. And this is the world we're all now living in. Why is that relevant for brands? Well, I blame a particular individual for this kind of polarization and the social media decline and the impact on societies, and it's not the person you're all thinking of. It is Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs didn't come up with the theory, but popularized the theory that we buy brands, not products. And why is that relevant to this era? Well, when you're buying a product, you're buying it from the features and the benefits. It goes faster, it lasts longer. Right? But when you're buying a brand, you're making a decision for the planet. You're making a decision for your family. I got hit with an Instagram ad for a toothbrush the other day. And it wasn't like it lasts longer, which is the only thing I really care about when I'm buying a toothbrush, if I'm honest. How long does it last between charges? No, I was making decisions for my family, for the environment, for the future. It's a frickin' toothbrush, right? It's a brand now. Everything is a brand. But the problem with brands is they bring baggage, right? If you're buying a brand, you're buying the attitudes and the behavior of the CEO. You're buying how they treat their employees, how they treat their supply chain, who they partner with, their decisions on contentious social topics. That's the baggage that comes with a brand, which exposes them to this, to the contentious social issues, right? And why is that an increasing risk for brands? Well, because as we get older and as new generations come in, people are increasingly buying on values and beliefs, right? Gen Z, the largest population in the world by volume, 90% of Gen Z will only buy from brands if they think those brands are improving the world in some kind of way. But there's no way that 90% of Gen Z agree on what that is, right? 55% of US online adults will boycott a brand that has intentional, unethical business practices. What on earth does unethical mean these days? 5 years ago, maybe there'd been some sense of kind of agreement on that. Now, I don't think so. 5 years ago, when Russia invaded Ukraine, everyone clearly, obviously on the same page in the whole Western world, clearly the aggressor, right? Let's close down operations in Russia at the cost of millions, if not billions of dollars. Easy decision to make, everyone agrees. What if Russia invaded Ukraine today? Where would those brands sit? Where would those choices come down? Yeah. So this is not even the bad part, right? This is where we are right now, the social media part. But then we're heading into the age of AI, and how does that change the game? Well, in the traditional news era, in the broadcast era, you had really large groups of people, left, right, rich, poor, very easy to find your audience, very easy to find some messaging for them. In the social media era, we got segmentation. We got the breakdown of the demographics, the ability to target and to reinforce those segments, those filter bubbles, through not just the demographics, but also region, language, topics of interest, right? Charlie yesterday talking about the fact you need to have that kind of additional layer to break down your segments and your audiences. And yes, you absolutely need that. But now, in the age of AI, you don't have segments or demographics to do that. You effectively have 7.5 billion individual audiences, because every one of those individuals is now using AI to get that content, right? That chatbot they use is effectively representing their values, their interests, based on hundreds of conversations. And if you want to know how well the chatbot knows you, I dare you, go into ChatGPT and ask it to give a psychological profile on yourself, and don't hold anything back. Scary, scary accurate understanding of who you are as an individual just through many, many different conversations, right? So we are now past the era of segmentation. We're now into effectively fragmentation, atomic fragments of audiences. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? This is a recent addition to my chat because it's the first indication we're actually heading in the right direction. So on the left-hand side here, you've got social media content. You can see the gray is the distribution of kind of the general population, and the peaks are what you see on social media. So the peaks show you that the extreme content to the left or the extreme content to the right, that's the content that's being promoted. That's the content you're seeing. You're not seeing the stuff in the middle because that doesn't capture your attention as much. And if you want to test this, by the way, go onto social media, go on Instagram, and look up flat earth theory, right? And Instagram, we're like, flat earth theory, I gotcha, right? Here's these influencers, here's this content. And you've only searched for it once, but the next 7 days, I'm going to share this with you just in case you forgot how interesting it was, right? Don't actually, I've done that for you, don't do that. And on the right, good news, that same kind of content distribution when it comes to conversations with the likes of Google or OpenAI, et cetera, is much more towards the mean, which is the way LLMs work, right? They're kind of generally looking at the whole range of content, and they're predicting the most likely output, so they're towards the mean. So if you have a conversation with ChatGPT, even if you have a conversation with Grok, and say, hey, tell me about flat earth theory, all of them will respond, I've got a bit of concern about this theory of yours, because science. So that's a good thing, I think. Actually, this could well be the best thing to happen to public discourse in a decade, right? Because we've got someone say, hey, you know what? Maybe you're being a little bit towards the edge there. I'm just going to throw this out there. This may be a theory you might not want to spend too much of your time on. This potentially is really, really good news. But the question that rises for brands is your claims, your values, your attitudes, your behaviors, right? To the LLMs, is that flat earth theory or is that science? And now you've got 7.5 billion individual audiences, but they're not human, to get that across to. And only one stat on LLMs, like, I don't know about you, but I'm seeing way too many statistics around 22% of Reddit. No, it's 44% of Reddit. It doesn't matter. That's all in the rearview mirror, right? Until we get APIs and actual insights into how those guys make decisions, whatever happened in the last 3 years tells us absolutely nothing about what they're going to do tomorrow. So anyone who's telling you that you can rely on the statistics is selling snake oil. But the one thing I think is interesting, and this isn't about kind of predicting the future, is that in the same way in the traditional media era, people targeted groups, right? And in the same way that the newspapers targeted certain groups, I suspect we might start to see the same thing from the LLMs. So you can see here that the US adults is the distribution at the bottom. And you can see that Claude, for example, is over-indexing on the higher earners, and that Meta is over-indexing on the lower end of the spectrum of earners. So I suspect we might start to see some homogenization here in the same way that we saw it for the traditional era, in the same way that we saw it for the social media era, right? You can say there's a different kind of person that goes on X these days as there is on Blue Sky. Very different. So if you care about one of those audiences, you better have the data to back it up. So that's all about how we're creating content and how we're consuming content. Obviously, the content itself is also increasingly AI kind of created, or this is a kind of a fun side of it, right? Anyone seen Tom Cruise and this thing? Cat with Shotgun. Anyone seen Cat with Shotgun? It's one of my favorites, anyway. So we're in a sort of a honeymoon period, I think, now with AI-generated content. It's all very funny, but there's a dark side to this, right? I didn't put anything on here to give it more airtime, but you don't even have to create very good content for it to cause an impact. If anyone remembers the Pentagon deepfake, actually wasn't a very good deepfake, but an immediate impact on the markets. Right, guaranteed, whoever was releasing that was shorting the markets in the immediate term before it. Look at we're in Ireland, right? Look at the presidential race from 6 months ago or so. The video of one of the leading contenders pulling out of the race had an impact on the polls. Like that itself has an impact. So the content itself is becoming AI generated. And the people that are creating the content are also becoming AI generated. So anyone know these people? Tilly Norwood, actress. Looking for representation right now, completely AI generated. I guarantee you she will find a part, because the producers know if they cast her, people will watch that show just to see how she performs, right? And her emotional range, her vocabulary, the tone of her skin, her accent, all of that changeable, right? All of that to create engagement, more resonant messaging delivery. Aitana Lopez, an overtly AI influencer, earning somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 a month on campaigns, even though she's overtly AI and run by an old dude in Spain. And then Aisha Gaban, anyone remember that one? So Dispatches, hard-hitting news broadcast in the UK. Aisha Gaban delivered 3/4 of that show before saying, "Oh, I bet you didn't realize I was AI." And I guarantee you no one did. Right? We're well past the point of being able to tell what is human and what is AI. And there's huge risks, obviously on the dark side of this, but also huge opportunities. That if you're going to try to speak to an audience, your ability to personalize the content and the deliverer of that content specifically to that audience is now almost limitless. So the one thing you need to know in this chaotic era, what it is that you need to figure out. Data-driven decision-making matters now more than ever. My favorite story of this. So anyone know Colin Kaepernick? He was the kind of American football player, took the knee during the national anthem. Calls for cancellation, boycotts, he should never play again, people not going to the games, right? Not exactly a poster child for a national ad campaign. But Nike stepped up and said, hold my Bud Light, did a national ad campaign on what he was saying because they ran the numbers, and I only found out after I started telling this story that it turns out they used Meltwater to get the data, which was nice. But they did the analysis and figured that the people calling for the cancellation, the boycotts, were not the kind of people burning through 3 pairs of Nike sneakers in a year. Right? They probably hadn't left the couch. So they lent into the audience that was commercially and economically important to them, and they got through it in a way that a lot of other companies hadn't done that analysis and just ask Cracker Barrel or M&M's or Bud Light, for example. Right? Not doing the data and not doing the analysis, that's what will burn you. But it is possible to navigate these conditions. It is possible to get your narrative out there. But really, really, you guys in the room are the secret sauce to brands navigating that. So how is AI going to help with any of this? So I think the elephant in the room, right? Are we just doing AI because everyone's doing AI? Right? You've got to do AI because AI. I think there are at least 4 specific reasons why for us here in this room, and for you guys especially, we have to lean into AI. right? Firstly, increased volume. It's not slowing down in terms of the amount of content that's being created, it's increasing. The increased demand, as every part of the business figures out it needs to make more data-driven decision-making, it's looking to you guys to find the data to answer those questions for them. I see the demand increasing from every department, but your resource is not increasing. In fact, I think your junior roles are starting to disappear. It's harder to learn. So post-COVID, we are now all more often working from our homes, right? The ability to just lean across the desk and get that expert, right? Oh, how do I just find that filter? Oh, there it is. Those little micro-learning moments, they add up. That learning by osmosis adds up, and we don't have that anymore. So like our software, and I'm not talking about Meltwater, I know a lot of the software in this industry, it all looks like it was built in the 80s. Compared to the kind of experiences kids are growing up on these days, which is Apple devices, swipe, and very, very high-end user experience. So it's very hard for them to learn, and it's getting harder because they have less patience. I'm not going to say this like kids these days don't have as much patience. They actually don't, and neither do we. Our own kind of onset of ADHD brought about by screen time is impacting all of this, but especially hard if you're coming out of school. And this is a real kind of comment from a client. He said, well, I've got a new starter. I gave her the materials. I gave her a walk through the product. And she was like, can't you just show me a TikTok on this? Right? That's the level of patience. That's the level of pace they want to get to. All of these things are solvable with AI. All of these things are why we in this room need AI. And how are we going to get there? Well, it's not with what we had in 2008, right? The sentiment analysis tools. Very simplistic, a model only capable of doing one thing, and even that not that well. AI as a tool. We still have these, and they are a necessary part of the mix, but that's not going to get us there. And what will also not quite get us there is the kind of AI that most of us got in 2023, which is the kind of the assistant level of AI. Having a conversation with AI, asking it questions, getting an output, right? This is now much more broadly capable AI, but you still need to sit there as the human and tell it what to do and take its output and do something with that. The assistant level of AI. And this is where most of us, frankly, are still today. What will get us there is the agentic level of AI, and that is this year. So this is effectively, and there's no commonly agreed description or definition of what agentic means, but there are a couple of common kind of features. One is that it's outcome orientated. So instead of like an assistant, go do this for me, you're saying, I want to achieve this, and it will help you figure out the tasks that are necessary and then go and carry out those tasks, right? So the difference between the assistant level of AI, when give me a social post, right, typical task you might ask an agent, goes up to, at the agentic level, create me an entire campaign, including the social posts that go with it. So that's the level we're aiming for. That's where we're going to be before the end of the year. What does that look like in sort of typical workflow that you might do, right? This is kind of my go-to top-level own kind of model of set your goals, do your honest analysis, create your content, you get it out there, and you see how you did. And right now, that process is mostly human-driven, right? You have to navigate every part of that process. You have to know how the software works. You need to keep that context in your head, take it to the next step. And if you don't do those things, nothing happens. And the AI comes in largely at the end, right? We'll do all the broad work, right? The heavy lifting of the analysis, sentiment analysis, topic analysis, clustering. All the stuff that we use AI for comes in largely at the end of this process. What happens when we apply the agentic level of AI to that typical process? Now the human is right up front, setting the goal, but the rest of that process is automated. I'm not going to say it's automated to 100%, automated to 80%, let's say, and then maybe 60%, maybe 80%. But the role of the human, therefore, is much more kind of feeding back to the AI. The human isn't doing the creating or the drafting. The human is doing the curating, the reviewing, and the approving. And this is a fundamental different relationship between you and the software, which is why it's taken us a while to get there, because it's a fundamentally different interface. It's a fundamentally different experience we need to build for you. The benefit, though, is that every time you give it feedback, it learns, and that is stored, and that becomes a memory, which improves over time. So when you have a really experienced person on your team, and they walk out the door, all of that knowledge and experience is lost. That like, oh, we tried that campaign before, it didn't work because of this, right? All that walks out the door. But not once we've got to the agentic level of AI. That becomes stored, and you start to build over time. Other things we've already released, which I think were part of the story that we've heard for the last couple of years, is all these parts will always remain human. Turning fairly bland, right, outputs and data outputs that you get from an AI assistant accurate, right? You can ask Mira any question on any of our data, get a 12-page report, but it's not going to wow anyone, right? And we know the problem with the analytics or insights isn't necessarily how accurately that is. Like, is anyone ever going to read them, right? They need to be engaging. We solved that problem. You can now use Mira to generate the report, push a button, and get a beautiful presentation, a lovely story of that. That's something I think was held onto as a human task, not so much anymore. And we're putting it everywhere, right? You don't even need to come to Meltwater to get that now. Whether you're on mobile, whether you're on Slack, whether you're on Teams, whether you're in Claude, whether you're in ChatGPT, whether you're vibe coding your own apps in Lovable and you're using the API, wherever you are, you can get access to our content and our intelligence and the business logic and that context that we've built up, the learning over time. It's all there and accessible wherever you are. And what that means, this is coming on to the impact for you guys, what that means is you don't necessarily need to even know what Meltwater is to get the benefit from our data. And this is where it starts to get interesting for you guys. Because before, right, you guys, the insights and experts would come to Meltwater, you would use it, and you produce your content, and you share it to your internal stakeholders, whether it's the leadership team or the marketing team or whoever, whether you've got hub and spoke or whether you're distributed, however that works, you were the experts to do that work. You learned how to use the software, you figured out how to knit those steps together, experts in the rigor and the analysis. But now, right, and this is where it gets really interesting, you are getting disintermediated. People are coming directly to us who have, and I would say, no idea what a good question really looks like, but they're still coming to us to ask the question. And they don't know it's not a good question. And this is where the concern comes in for me, for you, for this industry. Because there's a few things that happen, right? One, they get their answers faster. To them, that feels like an amazing win. I don't need to go and ask that really annoying analytics and insights person who's just going to challenge me on why I'm asking the question and what I'm going to do with the answer. I'll just go and ask the question myself and I'm off on my way, right? So great, they feel benefit. And in some cases, that's going to be a good thing because the simple work, right? And this is one of my favorite quotes from a client, not my quote, simple questions from simple people, right? That gets handled by the AI. So you don't get bothered by helping people figure out what the question is they even need to ask, right? This is a good thing for you. This is freeing you up, right? But there is a risk from that, which is those complex questions, like those people asking the questions who don't know what a good question is, they're also not going to know what a good answer is or what a bad answer is. They're not going to have the ability to know whether or not the AI is just being confidently wrong. This is a concern. But it's also an opportunity, like all risks, right? A risky opportunity. What this means, if you're getting rid of the dull stuff, you're getting rid of the simple stuff, you have more time to focus on the truly hard questions. But only if you can get your internal stakeholders to understand the value you add in doing that. Because if you don't, they will not come to you. If you don't, they will just answer the question themselves. This is the existential crisis that I think is facing this audience. A couple of things, a couple of helpful tips, right? A couple of things to make these, I've found these have landed quite well when we're talking to the people who aren't the experts. You have the ability to say no, where the AI does not. If you ask AI, go do this for me, like, go ahead and do it, right? It will not say no, for good reasons. We program it not to say no. That's something you, the human, will always have the ability to do. Going beyond the brief, if you ask AI to do something, it'll go and do it. And for very good reasons, we program it not to ignore the brief and go do something else. But you as a human could go, well, yeah, that was the brief, but I saw this opportunity. For a little bit of extra effort, we got a massively better result. You know, or the situation changed, the reality was different. And I used my ingenuity as a human, I just did something different because ultimately I'm driven by, what's best for the business, what's best for us, right? You have the ability to do that and the AI does not. And then choosing restraint. Right? The classic bias I see when people use AI is, how should I respond to this issue? And AI will be like, you should have a press release, create a press event. Very ambitious, very confident, often biased towards action, and you don't realize you did that with your prompt. How should I respond to this is not the right question. Should I respond to this is the first question you should ask, when most people skip that step. Right? And that's something a human would say, you know what, forget about it. This is tomorrow's chip shop paper. Right? Just don't even lean in, you're going to make it worse. These are all superpowers we have as humans, the AI does not. So, and this is kind of my last point, a little bonus thing at the end here, which is about how and when to use AI. So I'm going to just set the scene for how AMEC specifically might help you with this problem. And I actually, show of hands, how many people in the room are actually worried about the problem I just outlined? Okay, that's somewhat reassuring. Okay, join me for the AI roundtable at lunch today, where we'll be discussing the approach AMEC could take to help you with this. I've drafted some principles for AMEC. AMEC doesn't have any AI principles. I think we should have them. I don't think it's going to change the game. Lots of people have AI principles. And what I realized from the AI roundtable I ran yesterday is that, yes, we should have the principles, but what we really need is the key messages to explain the principles. How is it that you are better than a non-insight professional using AI? That's what we really need to do. And I say this from a self-interest perspective. I'm no longer an insights professional. I'm now building the products for you, right? But I would much rather sell to you a known quantity and a specific group of people than 1,000 random individuals in the business. So much easier for me to deal with you guys. So I would much rather be dealing with you. I'd much rather have double the number of people in this room next year, not half. Yeah? So, principles, human judgment first, transparency and disclosure, data quality and methodological rigor, can't believe I said that right, privacy and data governance, fairness and inclusion, accountability, governance, professional development. Suggestion of the principles, but really I think what I'm going to try and do is form those into more of a story to help you, because these, you could switch these out for other principles, and that's not the point, right? How do we tell the best story of the value you add to your business? That's actually, I think, what AMEC should be helping you with. Okay, before I go to QA, bonus, because I've still got like 2 minutes left. I find, and increasingly so, with every given task I get, I have this psychological sort of issue now, right? The productivity psychosis, where I'm thinking, oh, I should be using AI for that, but how? And is it good enough? And I waste, 10 minutes thinking about, is AI good enough for this, or should I just do it myself? That's becoming a bit of a cognitive load for me. And I don't know about you, but every single time I get a task, I'm thinking, should I be using AI? I come up with a very simple model for this, which is, do you enjoy doing the task? And are you good at it? And if you enjoy doing it and you're good at it, do it yourself. Don't feel guilty, right? Just do it, enjoy it. That's your differentiation. That's the value you add. Go ahead. If you enjoy doing the task, but you think you could be better at it, then you do the first draft, but get AI to coach you, challenge you, find your blind spots. Really good for spotting potentially unconscious bias in your own content. This is amazing. And this is probably one of the biggest areas of potential benefit, right, of AI. I don't care about building AI for this. Don't want to build AI for this. Want to build AI for this. Do you enjoy doing the task? No. Are you good at it? Yes. Efficiency, amazing. Get AI to do the first draft. You know what good looks like. You can edit it. You can improve it. Saves you a bunch of time. And there's a huge opportunity right there as well. And then lastly, do you enjoy doing the task? Are you good at it? No, no. Do not use AI, right? Or if you do use AI, get someone else to check it before you send it out. This is how we get AI slop, right? And we are sleepwalking, I think, into defaulting to AI, even in areas where we shouldn't be. Yeah? So quick benefit there, or a quick model. Everyone got the photos? Yes, good. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ant. That was great. That's the only slide I've taken a picture of.
What, the Q&A?
The one beforehand.
Okay.
So just in summary, Meltwater isn't killing the analyst industry.
How do we support the analyst better, right, is the question.
Okay, great, thank you. Who's got a question for Ant? Richard, in the middle. I sense this is going to be provocative.
No, it's not provocative. Hi, Ant.
Hey.
Great presentation. I love listening to you and the way you think about the future and the risks that you pose to us as an industry. A question for you, and as a representative of one of the largest media monitoring companies. What are you thinking about the future of content, which all of our products are based around still, when content is unique to every person in every situation? What are you going to build your tool around in the future? You must be thinking about this, and I'm just interested in your thoughts, and if you can share them with the AMEC community, because I think that is the big existential issue that a lot of this industry faces, when content becomes unique to everyone and no one knows what everyone else is individually seeing.
Yeah.
What on earth happens then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I don't have a really great answer for that challenge because it's also, in some ways, private to the individual. Yeah, it's not, for the exact reason, it's not shared. You're seeing an individual view of the world, even more so than you can sort of guess at what they're seeing on social media. And you can sort of figure out, we obviously have monitoring for that. We have GenAI Lens, right? You can do your LLM listening to see what kind of answers they're getting there. But when every bit of content is almost generated on the fly, dynamically for that individual, I honestly really don't know. I don't think we can because it's private to the individual. You know, I think the synthetic audiences work, which we're all starting on right now. Some people have already got that kind of live. We're working on that. Like that, I think, is probably the only answer.
It feels to me we're going to have to focus and shift our emphasis far more to measuring what people think and feel and behave, and then triangulate that back to what could have influenced it, rather than where we start at the moment, which tends to be what they're exposed to.
100%. I have a view that the single biggest piece missing in measurement right now is that we tend to measure the outputs, the content itself. We're not measuring the cognitive shift, right? We're not measuring the actual. We're charged with influencing or kind of informing public opinion, but we don't actually measure public opinion itself. We're measuring artifacts of it. So we've got product coming out on that later this year.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anne. That was fascinating.
No worries.
Really appreciate it.